First off, I apologize. I've been sick for a couple days, so front row is not really a great seat. It was a better seat a couple days ago than it is right now. I will try to sneeze in the reverse direction, but I want to thank everybody, Bob and Diane and Kevin. I mean, there's a lot of people that put in a lot of time to get this thing pulled together and to get everything done the way it's going to get done. I really want to thank my friend Dan, because Dan, he is a wonderful human being. I called him up, said, will you be the winter seminar speaker? He's like, yep. Give me a date. That was the extent of our negotiations. Yes, give me a date. And here he is. So I really appreciate that. He's obviously, I selfishly love to have him here because he said he's fun and he's funny and he's entertaining. So he's the ultimate package as a speaker, so, because he'll entertain for the whole day. So he'll be back there taking pictures, kissing babies if you got anything, you know, whatever you need. But seriously, he's a wonderful human being. I appreciate him taking the time, because it's a big cross-country flight for him to get here. I'm going to try something different. I have 90 minutes and I don't have 90 slides, so that's going to be unusual. Dan just went like this. Yes, I am going to not talk fast and try to jam in a lot of information. Is Drew here today? Yeah. So we had Drew in to talk to us about presentation skills, and it's always really good to kind of brush up on your presentation skills. And one of the things that he said is, you always have too much information and you're always rushing. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I always have too much information and I'm always rushing. So I'm trying less information today. I'm going to try not to rush, and I'm going to try to have time at the end for questions. So we'll see how that works. If you think at the end that was better, worse, whatever, let us know. So don't be afraid to let us know from a social media standpoint if you're on, whatever, Instagram, direct message, whatever you want to do, and say, hey, that was good, that was better, that was worse. You won't hurt my feelings, or you might hurt my feelings, but I'll get over it. So either way, it'll work. What I decided to do, Kevin said, what do you want to talk about? And he was kind of like, I don't know, what do I want to talk about? And then I thought, maybe I should talk about things that we're doing differently. Because one of the things that happens, and so I'll go to this next slide. I had a friend of mine send me an email from New York yesterday. And she said, I've been looking for a gym in New York, and I went into this gym, and the guy was like, oh yeah, I know, MBSC, I know Mike Boyle, I know all this stuff. Well, yeah, I follow them all the time, they're great. She said, I showed up and this is what I got. I got a 30-minute AMRAP with no warm-up, lots of burpees, heavy back squats, and idiot box jumps. So obviously, whoever it was that follows a lot of our stuff, we always talk about the idea that it's a recipe, and that there's an order that this has to go in. And so what we're hoping for everybody that's in here is that we can keep everybody at least up to date with why we're thinking the way that we're thinking, why we're doing the things that we're doing, why we're making the changes that we're making. I'm not saying you have to make them, but at least you're going to be aware of, okay, this is what's going on, this is what we're changing. I love Dumb and Dumber, if anybody's, I'm a movie aficionado, but this for me was a really big year for I can't believe it took me 38 years to think of this stuff. So we're going to talk about some things and you're going to be like, duh. But this is actually the scene. Okay, I should have actually got the video where the cop's yelling at him, pull over. And he's like, it's a cardigan, but thank you. And that's one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. But that's that scene. That's the picture right there. You should have at least one good movie reference in every presentation. I'm sure Dan has one in his. So we're going to try to go in order. So we're going to start kind of with warm-up stuff, talk about things from a warm-up perspective that might be different, and then talk about things sort of as move through into strength, into conditioning. Sort of the same way that the workout would proceed is the way we're going to try to go through this thing and go through it in an orderly sequence. The number one thing that we've changed, and actually I can grab one right here, which is really good. There are certain things that are game changers. I don't work for Rolga. I don't get any money from Rolga. This is a game changer. It's so much different than normal foam rolling because the way the grooves are, your bones fall into the grooves. The sensation of the Rolga is entirely different than the sensation of a regular foam roller. And I've told this story a couple times, but the guy cornered me a couple years ago, I think in Providence, and was like, just try it. And I was like, oh, you got another freaking bumpy roller. Great. Like, you're the 19 millionth bumpy roller guy. And he was like, no, you really have to try it. Just get on the floor for a minute and try it. I get on the floor and I rolled around and I was like, shit. And he's like, shit what? And I'm like, shit, I'm going to have to buy a bunch of these. You were right. Like, this is really different. So if you have not gotten on these, get on them and try it. The interesting thing about it, your clients won't like them. So we had, for a really good stretch, we had people wandering around in here trying to find the regular old foam roller because they were saying things like, those ones hurt too much. I don't like them, they hurt too much. And I'm like, that's kind of the idea. I hate to say that foam rolling is the only area where we talk like no pain, no gain probably actually comes into play. And foam rolling should be pretty uncomfortable, and if you're getting spots where it's uncomfortable. And here, like if I roll my, my spinal erectors, the spinous process falls into that little gap, and I can really penetrate into the spinal erectors. If I try to roll my posterior rotator cuff, my humerus falls into that groove, and I can really get into that. The same thing applies to the hip, wherever you are. So this, to me, was a really big game changer. So it's something that from a warm-up standpoint, if you are foam rolling, which we are hoping you are, because we think everybody should be foam rolling before they work out, try the Rolga. There'll be a bunch of them that are out here today. Like I said, I am not a compensated endorser, but I do believe it makes a really big difference. And when you get them, though, just get them and get rid of the other ones. If you buy Rolgas, because this is what happened to us, and you keep the other ones around, all your clients will just go get the other ones. I literally was like, put all the other ones in a bag, get rid of them. Give them to the kids to take to practice with them, whatever. Just get them out of the room. So somehow there's still one. If you look, there's one that's still hiding out in that rack somehow. But we tried to get rid of them all. This is another thing. We're constantly in this kind of T-spine. And if you look at that, that's me. And the reason I did that is because I am terrible at this. But if you think probably your average 60-year-old probably does not have really good thoracic spine mobility. And the reason I realized this was the best T-spine mobility exercise we could do was because I tried it and I couldn't do it. Okay. Everything else that we've done from a T-spine standpoint, I find a really good way to cheat. For some reason, that degree of abduction really locks your pelvis in place. Your pelvis is locked in place, your lumbar spine is locked in place, and the only place that you can rotate is at your thoracic spine. I'm watching Dan back there is now trying this T-spine exercise in the back. This is why I love you, Dan, because you're a thinker. No, I love that about you. But again, really makes a really big difference, because when you look, we stopped doing this stuff a long time ago. Because people would tell me all the time, yeah, I do that for my thoracic spine. And I'm like, no, you don't do that for your thoracic spine. You do that to your lumbar spine. Okay? You can't do any of these things for your thoracic spine. You can try, but you will not succeed based on what's called relative stiffness, right? So if we look, maybe I have to aim at it? Oh, I did. Okay. And I've used this slide a million times. Rotation of the lumbar spine is more dangerous and beneficial, and rotation of the pelvis and lower extremities to one side while the trunk remains stable or is rotated to the other side is particularly dangerous. I say this all the time. If we go back to this, particularly dangerous. Okay, that's not good for you. None of those movements are good for you, because they put your lumbar spine at risk. And even though people say, I love what people say, well, if you really focus, you can get your T-spine. I'm like, that's a lie, just so you know. You can't. There's a thing called physics that tells you that that's not going to be true. And, basically, I meant to get 2 little bands, but I don't have one, but I can do this with 2 big bands. This is the stuff that people tell me that I love, but it drives me crazy. If I have these 2 bands hooked together like this, and I tell you that I am going to selectively make the thicker band lengthen, do you think I can do that? No. Okay, no, absolutely not. Right? If I start pulling, only one band moves, right? The least stiff band is the one that moves. When you get into positions like this, what moves is what's least stiff. And generally, for most people, your lumbar spine is less stiff than your thoracic spine. What's going to move when you do that movement is your lumbar spine. You can't, I can't stand here and go, I'm going to do like my Vulcan mind trick, and I'm going to make the thick band move instead of the thin band. It doesn't work. It's physics, right? We can't deny physics. We have a lot of physics deniers, more and more in strength and conditioning all the time, but we've just got to realize that it doesn't really work that way. And that's why some people, like, if I do that, the only thing that occurs for me when I do that is my lower back bothers me. I never feel anything in my thoracic spine. Yet the flip side, when I do that V-stance T-spine that we showed you, I literally look like I'm paralyzed. When I first started doing it, I was like, holy shit. I mean, it was bad. But you realize, and this is the things that we think about. But what percentage, because we said updates and athlete program, but none of this has anything to do with athletes so far. What percentage of you have clients like, well, when I say normal age clients, I consider normal age to be in their 60s. So what percentage of you have normal age clients? Yeah, almost all of you, right? I'm going to tell you a story that Dennis Kaiser told me one time. Dennis Kaiser is the guy that invented Kaiser equipment. And he said he invented Kaiser equipment because he was really interested in helping the senior population. That was where the idea initially came from. The sort of whole athletic application of that was a kind of secondary thing that just happened by accident. But he said basically that you end up in a nursing home when you lose the ability to flex and rotate. Does everybody understand what flex and rotate means? If I was sitting down in a chair right now and I flexed and rotated, could people begin to grasp what the concept? Okay? When you can't wipe your ass, wiping your ass is flexion rotation. Okay? You end up in a nursing home because your kids, no matter how much they love you, at the moment that they realize they're going to have to wipe your ass, they're like, Dad, it was really great having you. You know, we're gonna, right? But I just remember sitting there looking at him and thinking, wow, I never thought about it that way. But he said, yeah, he said, this is what happens. He said, there's a whole bunch of things that can happen that nobody gets too worked up about. But suddenly when you hit that point with a parent at home where you realize, okay, these people can no longer care for themselves in the bathroom, that's like when it's time to make that somebody else's job, unfortunately. So you start thinking about this ability to maintain T-spine rotation, to get somebody who can continue to be able to rotate and laterally flex is really, really important, particularly much more so as we age, but it's still important for athletes. This is another big duh moment, right? We rarely move in 90-degree angles. So if we watch a lot of games, it's really rare. We just, Super Bowl just played. No matter how many football games you watched, I would tell you, okay, pick out a time where the guy stopped and then went immediately that way. I would bet that would be pretty limited. Maybe 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20, 1 out of 100. But if I said, show me a sequence where the guy stops here and then moves himself off sort of more at a 45-degree angle, say, going to happen way more. In our part, we did this. We were literally linear lateral, okay? Forward, sideways. And then one day I started thinking about it and I thought, I was reading an ACL article and they were showing sort of the mechanism for ACL tear. And again, the mechanism for ACL tear was very rarely a pure lateral cut. It was somebody attempting to decelerate and then move. That's where the ACL tear happens. When we're thinking about unilateral plyos, we're thinking about ACL injury prevention in a large degree. So when you look at a lot of this stuff that we're doing. So one of the things that we started to realize was, okay, when we're going to do lateral stuff, why don't we actually do sort of 45-degree lateral versus 90-degree lateral? And we sit down, we always have we have our staff meetings, team meetings, and we sit there and we think, why aren't we doing this? And everybody had the same kind of duh feeling that I had, like, I don't know, because we've been doing that. I mean, that video at Tricia is probably from 2005. We've probably been doing the same plyo stuff for 15 years, and it's worked pretty good. But suddenly we start looking and thinking, suddenly to me, going medially and laterally at more like a 45-degree angle makes infinitely more sense to me than going medially and laterally at a 90-degree angle in terms of the injury prevention benefits. So this, you might look at that and think, not a big deal. I would look at it and think, no, that's a really big deal. This is another thing, and this is the one, if we talk about things that we still haven't figured out yet, okay? Elasticity, and that's supposed to play. Let's see if I can make that play. I think this is the legit missing link. This might not be a video, that's why. Oh, no, it is. That was actually somebody, obviously you can tell that's somebody's Instagram making fun of me, because it didn't actually look like that. I don't know who did. That was probably Nico did that, because it's on the Body by Boyle one. But, if you look at what great athletes can do that not great athletes can't do, it's that, I would call it's that bouncy thing. When you watch a really great athlete, I always say, like, if you watch a really great track and field athlete, you just see there's this bouncy thing. It's like, they got it, and then you watch somebody else who's not a very good athlete, they don't got it. I said the really bad athletes look like you threw, if you ever throw a bag of dirt out of a truck, like out of the back of your pickup truck, you just throw a bag of sand onto the ground, and it's just like, bloop. Doesn't bounce at all, right? But if you went the same way and you threw like a basketball out of the back of your truck, it'd be like boing, and it would bounce right out. Good athletes are way more like basketballs than bags of dirt, okay? But what we need to do, what our job is to try to turn bags of dirt into basketballs. Really, if we want to look at that, right? But how to do that, so this is hard, this is tough to see. That spring floor, if you look, actually, you can turn to your left and you'll see it right there in the corner. It's actually spring gymnastics floor, so if you look, like Bill Knowles, who actually was our speaker a couple years ago, he has a whole runway of just spring floor so that he can do a lot of this bouncy, elastic stuff with his athletes. We went and I bought a little mini trampoline, and I'm thinking for this summer I might buy a lot of mini trampolines so that we can try to work with our athletes on getting that bouncy feeling. Some people are doing that with bands, like you'll see some of the triphasic stuff, they'll have like assisted plyos where they're doing band stuff off the rack and pulling off that. My only issue with that, and I say this all the time, I'm always in the think like a lawyer mode. And if we came in here now, you see this place, if I give the average 14-year-old in here that band and say, okay, jump up and down off the squat rack with the band pulling you towards that big metal rack, I am going to guarantee you that some kid is going to faceplant himself into the rack, and then I'm going to be trying to explain to his mother why this was a really good idea to make him more bouncy and have him jumping from the rack. So we've got to think about these things and realize there may be simpler things. I don't even really love the mini tramp idea because I'm still worried about a kid falling off the mini tramp, but I think that this is the mystery to me. We have to figure out a way to create this elasticity, and we're trying and trying and trying, but it's one of those things that you hate to look at it and think some people have it, some people don't have it, but it certainly looks like some people have it and some people don't have it. But it also, when we look at some of our younger kids, and we can actually see it in our staff members. Actually, I should have pulled up Kev's thank God I didn't. Kev escaped on that one. But we've seen it with our staff from doing a lot of the stuff that we do. Their vertical jumps have gone way up, and they've become way more elastic from doing the type of training that we're doing. But I still think that this elasticity thing is kind of the great mystery. So whether it's spring floor or whether it's mini tramps or whatever it is, we've got to figure out some way to make people a little bit more springy. This is one of the ways, obviously, that we're doing that. When we think about plyometrics, if you think old school plyometrics, or even actually not even that, if you think plyometrics in the true sense is that idea of, throwing the basketball down hard. The idea is that there's elastic energy that's stored, there's elastic energy that's released. And the idea is that you want to be as fast off the ground. You read all the old plyo stuff, and it's like resist the ground, react to the ground, repel the ground. All very true, very valid stuff. The problem with that is if you do that with most people, they get hurt fairly quickly. They break down fairly quickly. So when we do this, I always say most of our plyometrics are not plyometrics. So when we say we're doing plyos, we're actually doing jumping. So if we do a 12-week plyometric program, we do like a 9-week jumping program and then 3 weeks of plyometrics. Because the reality is box jumps aren't plyometrics. Box jumps are box jumps. I jump on a box. There's nothing plyometric about me jumping on a box. Doesn't make it a bad exercise. It just means that it's not a plyometric exercise. I would need to jump off the box and onto another box in order to make that technically a plyometric exercise. So for us, we will generally start with non-plyometric jumps up to something. We will then progress to non-plyometric jumps over something. But the third thing that we'll do is we'll start to try to get this idea of elasticity, okay? We're going to try to make you a little bit bouncy, but we're not going to try to make you a lot bouncy. We're not going to try to tell you, get off the ground as fast as you can right off the bat. Because The problem with plyometrics is that the target of plyometrics is the nervous system. The inadvertent target of plyometrics is the tendon system. So when you miss, you get tendonitis. You know, it's like you do this wrong, and you get people saying, my knees hurt. So our goal, I wrote an article a long time ago, I said our goal for our plyometric progression is people increasing their vertical jump with 0 patellar tendonitis. If we get a bunch of people to increase their vertical jump, but they get patellar tendonitis, then we've basically failed in the process. What we did, and this, I wish I could think what soccer team. I was watching on Twitter. I'm a huge Twitter person. I love Twitter. So some European soccer team did this. And I thought, that's such a good idea, I'm going to immediately steal it and forget who I got it from and not be able to reference it, which is always the best way when you're stealing other people's stuff, to immediately forget who you got it from and not be able to reference it. But really good, because now what we're trying to get somebody to think is just that little bit of elasticity. We're going to try to make you a little bit bouncy, right? Oh, just so you know, you have to point at this thing, because I keep not pointing. Now this is interesting, because we were saying some people were struggling with the mini hurdle, particularly with unilateral. One of the geniuses here, I don't remember who it was, someone said, why don't we just flip the hurdles upside down? So we just have a little barrier for them to go over, and I thought, that's a really good idea. So we did it. But it's interesting. Now see, she's got, Megan's probably one of the best female defensemen in the world. She played in the last Olympics. She's, I don't know, she's probably 22, I guess. But you can see, she's got that little bit of elasticity that you're looking for. Even at, and she's 5'11", 160 pounds probably. But she's able to do that unilaterally. And even though now we're talking about athlete programming, this stuff, I will say this, do I need my adults to be able to do this? No. Do I need my adults to be more powerful? Do I need my adults to be able to maintain their explosiveness? Yes. And we've said this a bunch of times too, but it bears repeating for everybody. Adults are losing power at a rate of 1.7 times the rate they lose strength. Which means if let's say between the ages of 40 and 50, I lose 10% of my strength, I lose 17% of my power. And you think, oh, that's not that big a deal. It's a really big deal over 2 or 3 years, because over 2 years I lost 20% of my strength and I lost 34% of my power. And over 3 years I lost 30% of my strength, and now I'm up to like 50-something% of my power is gone. That's a massive difference over 3 decades, and what you're realizing is you have someone who is really weak and not reactive. Those are the people who get hurt stepping off curbs. Okay, those are the people who get hurt in really, really simple situations. So this stuff, obviously, it applies in a modified sort of thought process. I don't think most, are our adults going to be able to do the types of unilateral plyos that our athletes do? No. Do our athletes need to make sure that our adults rather need to make sure that they're jumping and landing and working on the neural aspect of this? Absolutely, positively, yes. From an athlete standpoint, see, this is just so you know, this is what most handsome older men look like. Dan's one of those unfortunate guys who's maintained his hair, which is, I mean, it's just not, you're just not as good looking as you get older. It's scary. I meet Tony and I'm like, oh, he's a more shaved head version of me. He is exactly the same age as me. It's pretty scary. But from a speed development standpoint, this guy singularly changed what we did more than anybody in the last 2-year period. He is a high school, actually just retired. He's a high school track coach, or was a high school track coach in Illinois. And probably up until 2 years ago, I would say was a relative unknown. But super smart, high school chemistry teacher. You always think if you're teaching high school chemistry, you're pretty smart. He's just got a really good analytical brain. And he wrote an article. The first one I think that I wrote, or that I read, was called Record, Rank, and Publish. Just talking about the idea that if we want people to get faster, we need to record their times, rank their times, publish their times. Now, I have some level of disagreement, no disagreement with record. I get a little bit of disagreement with rank, and I'm not sure about publish, but recording times makes a really, really big difference, because one of the things that we've realized from a speed development standpoint, when someone says to me, I want my kid to get faster, what should my first question be?
Does the kid want to get faster?
Oh, that would be my first question. Okay, what should my second question be? She just said, does your kid want to get faster? I'm like, that should be the first question. That was a really, really good answer. I love you. You're a good front row seat person. I hope I don't give you a cold tomorrow, but but the second question then, right? How fast is your kid? Right? This is what Tony said. The one thing that you realize is that everybody's like, I want my kid to get faster. He needs to get faster. Like, how fast is he? They're like, no, not fast. Like what's not fast? And this was one of the biggest, like I said, when you get to the duh moments. I wrote an article about this whole idea called 37 Years at the Train Station Waiting for My Ship to Come In. Because I realized we spent so much time worrying about people getting faster, but we timed them twice a year. As college strength coaches, we'd time them maybe right before the preseason, and then maybe we'd time them right after the season was over or in the middle of the summer. So twice a year, we would actually quantify, and then we'd go next door in the weight room and be like, man, I'm going to work my ass off getting this person faster. And you're like, what do I notice about the weight room? One thing you notice about the weight room, Dan's like this, verticality, right? If I'm in the weight room, there's not a lot of horizontal stuff going on in the weight room, is there? Right? No, I mean, everything's pretty much up and down, right? If I squat them up and down, if I deadlift them up and down, if I'm clean them up and down. If we look at that and say, how much carryover do I think that's going to have to me going from here to there? I might look at that as an amateur physicist and say, it might be a little limited. But I will tell you, as a professional strength coach for a really long time, I thought for sure that the key to going horizontally was in that vertically oriented room next door. And that's, like I said, that's the duh, like, maybe it's not exactly supposed to be that way. And Tony, this is what's crazy. So I brought Tony out here to speak a year ago? Yeah? Last year, probably around this time. And everybody was all up in arms. Because one of the things that Tony says, because now you got to remember, he's a track coach. That's what he does. And he basically said, I don't care if my track guys lift. He said, my track guys that play football lift. My track guys that don't play football don't lift. If I have sprinters who don't want to lift, I don't care. That brought everybody in our staff meeting was like, I can't believe you let him come here and say that. And I'm like, I brought him here intentionally to say that. I wanted him to say that because I want you to have to think about, why would a 60-year-old guy who's been coaching for 40 years say something that stupid? Probably because he thinks it's true, right? And probably because everything that he's done over the last 40 years has shown him that it's true. And the point of it is to make you think. It made us really think, right? It made me think one thing, sprinting, good Holy Grail reference, Daniel liked that, I'm sure. Sprinting is the Holy Grail. If someone said to me now, you only get to do one thing, I'm like, okay, we're going to run sprints. That's it. If you always have those dumb T Nation articles, if you can only do one exercise, whatever, that someone always asks you to write. If someone asked me to write that dumb exercise, that article today, I would say sprint. Right? Because, and this is so, the greatest race in history, anybody who studies sprinting has studied this race. Carl Lewis, Ben Johnson. Theoretically diametrically opposed people. In the sense, if you look at Lewis, you see a taller, lankier guy who was never known to be a weight room person. Maybe was even a little disdainful of the weight room if you study his training methods, right? If you go to the other guy, banned for life for steroids, and a really big proponent of the weight room. They were constantly talking about, Johnson can bench, 365, Johnson can squat 600, Johnson can do this, Johnson can do that. If you're a strength coach, who do you like? Johnson, right? Of course, you're a Johnson guy, because he's reinforcing for you that what you're doing is working, right? But let's look at the reality of the situation. And I should have had the times up there. Maybe I did. No, I didn't put that one up. Sorry. nearly identical times. Almost every race they ran, we're talking about hundredths of a second between one of them winning and one of them losing, and it was always one of those two guys. Now, me being the freaking genius that I am, I look at this picture and I think, okay, one guy doesn't really like lifting weights, one guy loves lifting weights. They're both running the exact same times. What's the common denominator here? Of course, I scratch my head for a couple of minutes and I think, sprinting. The common denominator is sprinting. Both of these guys, and I tell people all the time, Google, if you have a chance today, Google Usain Bolt weight training. Everybody just laughed. It's horrible, right? Have you ever watched? Horrible. Leg extension, leg curl, leg press. I mean, you look at it and it literally looks like a 1980s YMCA video, right? And then, of course, a brilliant guy like me thinks, oh, give me that guy. I could make him the fastest man in the world. And you're like, ooh, he's already the fastest man in the world, so maybe I can't make him the fastest man in the world. But what's that idiot doing? He's doing something that's making him the fastest man in the world, and it's definitely not the incredibly modern strength program that he's adhering to, is it? No. You know what it is? He tries to run fast a lot. And we're laughing, but you're laughing because it's exactly that duh, like he tries to run fast a lot. So this was us before, right? That was, sprinting, ball drops. Nice little sprint drill, right? We drop the ball, the guy tries to go get it. We did a lot of, I would say, we did a lot of kind of fast running drills. And in kind of fast running drills, people who want to run really fast will run really fast, and people who don't really give a shit will just kind of mail it in on you and give you their whatever, 70, 80% sort of thing. When you suddenly start timing them, and this is Tony's idea of record, rank, publish, even though I'm not a fan, especially for us because we deal with a lot of kids, I don't like to have a lot of negative self-image sort of opportunities for these kids, but they're pretty smart on their own. I don't need to create negative self-image opportunities for 14 and 15-year-olds. They're very, very good about doing that on their own. All we need to do is set the table for that to happen, which is go 1, 4, 4, and then someone else go 1, 3, 6. Okay, 2 really smart kids can figure out that someone just ran faster than someone else. That didn't take. I don't have to put a chart up on the wall. I don't have to put a list and say where you rank. I have a group of 10 kids that train pretty regularly. If I ask them to list the kids from 1 to 10, fastest to slowest, every one of them could do it. I've never put that list up on the wall. I've never made a point of it. No need to do that. They know. But the difference was, and this is why it's funny, so here, now this is what's really funny. So Mia, you need a Mia in your group, okay? Mia's like one of my favorite people in the whole world. Because she is an absolute freaking animal, right? And when we start doing this, do you know who the fastest person in the group is? Now we started at 12, pre-male puberty. Mia is the fastest person in the group. Very motivating for young boys when they are getting their ass kicked by young girls, okay? I literally had to counsel my poor son, thank God he's not here to hear this story. Like, take him aside and be like, Mark, just so you know, testosterone will win the race. Eventually, God will swing in here for you and help you to advance beyond Mia. But, I mean, it's the reality of you start timing and these kids start knowing. When my son starts, the first day that we run, he runs 1:87 and he looks at me and he said, Dad, I'm really slow. And I was like, yes, you are. You're really slow. You're actually the slowest person here. He was. I mean, he was the slowest person in his group. But the difference was, now, a year later, he goes from 1:87 in the 10 to 1:47 in the 10. Now, if you know anything about speed at all, Dan, I love it. Dan, I just need Dan for the facial expressions in the back because he's like my reinforcement machine in the back. He just was like, because 0.4 seconds over 10 yards is friggin' massive. It's about 0.8 in the 40. So if you can imagine having a kid and said, yeah, I dropped this 40 time by 0.8 seconds this year. You're a genius. Like, you're a genius. What did you do? You dropped this 40 time by 0.8 seconds. But I didn't say we went from 6.0 to 5.2. which is probably about what we did, is we went from probably 6.0 to 5.2 in all honesty. But still, massive. The difference for him as a kid, totally like life-changing for my son. Because he goes from like average lacrosse player to really good lacrosse player, strictly based on the fact that he can now run faster. Nothing else had changed. His skill level was not very much different. His ability to run was significantly different. He goes from 3 years ago, he gets cut from his select lacrosse team, and the guy basically says, you can be on the B team and practice with us. And I was like, Mark, you can be on the B team and practice with them. That's good for you. To last year, he makes the cut for the under 15 national team. He's one of 75 kids that goes to Baltimore. The difference is only his ability to run. I will tell you that his ability to play lacrosse did not change significantly during that time period. So this is, I mean, when I talk about it being game-changing, it is game-changingly different, right? Now, that's me again. This is what's interesting, I think, from a speed standpoint. That's my son, Mark. But this is what's interesting. Self-organization. Because when we talk about speed development, the other area where I think we've wasted a massive amount of time is trying to teach people how to run fast. And there's a really great, there's a book called Most Likely to Succeed, and it's basically a book about the education system. But in Most Likely to Succeed, the author's a guy named Ted Dintersmith. He talks about if we taught bike riding in school. He said if we taught bike riding in school, he said, you know, the first thing we'd do is we'd get, like, the kid would get a picture of the bike, and he'd have to, like, match names. You know, you'd have to, derailleur, where's the derailleur, you know, where's the rear differential, you know, where is the handlebar, where is the brake, all this stuff. He said, you know, we'd teach bike riding for 6 months. He said, but no one would ever ride a bike. He said, and no one would ever get any better at riding a bike because nobody rode a bike. So, and I think that, like, with people in sprinting, you know, they're like, oh, you know, we're going to do all these drills, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And I'm like, that's great. You can develop a kid who does really pretty drills. How are we doing from A to B? Have we been checking A to B on a regular basis to see if all the stuff that you did actually transferred from A to B? So for us, any of that stuff, we have a relatively short name for all that stuff: warm up. Okay, before we sprint, we warm up. Some of our warm up looks like sprint drills. We might do some high knee running, and we might do some heel ups, and we might do some skipping. Warm up. The speed development work, twice a week, the way that we do it right now, twice a week, every kid in here runs at least 2 timed 10-yard dashes. And we record the times. It is that simple. If you were here yesterday, you would have seen the lane down the middle. We used our infinite knowledge of geometry and realized that the hypotenuse of a right triangle was longer than this way, so we made a lane right down the middle of this place so that we could get 5-yard fly 10s. So basically, what we're doing, initially we start with 10-yard sprint, standing start, not moving. 3 weeks of that. Second 3 weeks, 5-yard fly in. So now we just have the timer set up. We give them 5 yards to run up, run through the timers. The week after that, 10-yard fly in. During the winter, we don't get beyond 10-yard fly in because we don't have room for beyond 10-yard fly in. During the summer, we'll go to 15-yard fly in. The nice thing about that, it's a lot of self-reinforcement because every time we make the fly longer, you automatically get faster. Because if you look, and this is what Tony does, like Tony Haller's thing, he gets his flying 10 time from the 30 to 40 segment of a 40-yard dash. But he does 40-yard dashes twice a week with his athletes. He hand times the 40-yard dash. He uses his electronic timer to get the 30 to 40 segment. So his flying 10 times are faster than our flying 10 times because he has a 30-yard lead up in his. The most we've ever had is a 15-yard lead up. So we very rarely get someone who ever runs under a 1. I don't think we've had anybody actually run under a 1. Maybe Hayden did 0.98. I don't know if he had 15 or 20 yards. We had a track guy from UMass who was a intern who did a 0.98, but I forget what the run-in was. But some really fast people will get like 0.88 in that 30 to 40 segment. So the idea is that it's constantly dropping. The thing that we're looking at with flying 10, and this after we had Tony in, because we've been spending a lot of time studying this, we had Tony in, then we brought Ken Clark in, who's a professor at, is he at Westchester? Yeah. He's at Westchester in Pennsylvania. I was like, he's at one of the Pennsylvania state schools, but he's at Westchester. Another really smart guy and a cool guy because he coaches track and does research, which I think anybody who coaches and does research automatically gets like an extra check mark in my book because they're not just doing research, but they're actually coaching people and doing research. But he said that you're flying 10 times, so your max speed, max velocity, theoretically, he said is like max bench press. We want that to keep going up, keep going up, keep going up. He said because the more your max, when I get your max velocity to the point where you're sub 1.0, he said suddenly your 80% is really fast. In the same way, like if I could bench press 400 pounds, I'm obviously going to do more reps at 300 pounds than a guy who can bench press 300 pounds. That's just logic. And it's the same logic that we'd see in sprinting. So for us, if you said what's the biggest thing we've changed? Absolutely, positively, sprinting. This is interesting because these are slow-mos. Watch these. Oops, sorry. The most interesting part of this, like watch, if you know sprinting, watch what their lower bodies are doing. And watch how they're all going to be very nearly identical. So this kid, Evan, he's the best athlete probably in the group. And interestingly enough, he's a freshman. I think he might even be the leading scorer on the high school varsity team right now in hockey. So he's a really good athlete. But if you look in terms of where he's supposed to be stepping up over his knee, heel coming up over to his butt, like all of the mechanical things. This is my son Mark. He's an upper body a little bit all over the place. But watch what his lower body is doing. And the point is, you're going to see every one of them is nearly identical. Every one of them is getting their foot down relatively close to being exactly under their hip. Every one of them is cycling through exactly the way we want them to. I can tell you the reason I did this and the reason I slow-moed it is to see if this was actually happening. I didn't know if this was really happening or not. Because when you're watching it going full speed, you're kind of like, oh, this looks pretty good. But this is that self-organization idea that I talked about. If I say to this kid, run from here to there as fast as you can. If he doesn't run faster, you know what he does? He tries something different. He starts to self-organize. He starts to think. So when we start saying to the kids, push the ground as hard as you can, they start thinking. And sometimes I'll say, just push the ground harder. Just think about pushing the ground as hard as you can. And suddenly they run a faster time. And they think, wow, if I push the ground as hard as I can, I run a faster time. There must be some relationship between my ability to push the ground and my ability to go that way. It's incredible how simplistic this concept is. And as I said, what a complete training game changer it is. I spoke at Holy Cross last year when they had just finished their new weight room. And Jeff Oliver is one of my best friends who's the strength coach at Holy Cross. Was like, I can't do that in this weight room. And I literally looked at him. I was like, take some shit out. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, take some stuff out. Get rid of some equipment. He's like, I can't do that. This is all new. I just bought all new stuff. I'm like, I don't care. I said, if I was you right now, if you asked me what to do, I'd change the design of the whole weight room so I could sprint in the weight room. If someone said to me right now, I'm rewriting the second book that I wrote, and it was called Designing Strength Training Programs and Facilities. When I start talking about facilities, number one thing I would tell somebody in designing a facility, have a place to sprint. Have as much linear distance to sprint as you possibly can. As much unobstructed linear distance as possible, because this is game changing. Because one of the, and this is again, if we think about the simplistic stuff of life. I actually watched a video. It was a promotional video for Boston University, but one of the things that they were talking about was the BU cross country team. One thing that I noticed, cross country runners aren't the healthiest looking people in the world. Right? I mean, I'm just saying, but go watch some videos of cross country and then try to tell me that you think, yeah, that's the picture of health. No. Right? It's not. It's just not. But now, go to a track meet and just go down, just say, oh, I'm just going to go watch the sprinters, the jumpers. they look pretty darn healthy, right? When you think about what my client would like to look like, I'm pretty darn sure that your client would be much more tuned into looking like what the sprinters and the jumpers look like than what the cross-country runners look like. I always said, like, no one ever brings you the picture of someone crossing the marathon finish line. And it's like, yes, this is the physique that I'm looking for. I'm looking for the emaciated Kenyan look with the billowy shorts.